Ashes on the mausoleum floor. Bloodstains the Colosseum doors.
If you have a channel dedicated to history, you cannot miss the movie premieres or new TV shows that are somehow related to the subject. It generates a lot of views, you can't miss the opportunity. So today I'm gonna go really low. This time I react to a movie trailer. The only justification for that, apart from the opportunity to grab some views, is that the trailer for Gladiator II is hilarious. And we're dealing with a sequel to one of the biggest peplum movies in existence. So the first thing I need to address is the name of the movie and its subject matter. Sorry for the redundancy, but this film is about a gladiator, and gladiatorial combat takes the central part here, which is a problem in itself. A century of filmmaking normalized this atrocious depiction of gladiatorial combat in mass culture, and it shouldn't be that way. Back in the day, I made a 40-minute video on the first Gladiator movie, where, apart from other things, I've said that filmmakers, writers and artists should be mercilessly ridiculed for their demented and outlandish depictions of ancient sports and ancient entertainment. If you're releasing a movie about football and your idea of football is that two teams are killing each other with sharp objects and constantly cutting each other's heads, this is mental. People are gonna laugh out loud at you. They will think you need to seek medical help. But when filmmakers do exactly that with their depiction of gladiatorial combat, everyone is like, okay, it's a movie trope, let's play along, that's fun. No, it is not fun, it is mental. Gladiators were essentially more like modern-day American wrestlers. Yeah, wrestlers can get hurt, their life expectancy is quite low, etc., etc., but we're dealing with a hybrid of professional sports and theater, with scripted combat. These attempts to depict ancient Rome as a society of degenerates are repulsing. Now, with this thing out of the way, we can discuss what else we see in this hilarious trailer for a 250 million blockbuster that somehow looks a bit like a B-movie. First of all, we see naval battles in the Colosseum. Naval battles were a thing, but we can't discuss it properly because sometimes it is not entirely clear what it really was. And no, a naval battle in the Colosseum is a bit too much, but we know of their comparable spectacles. One of the most famous naval reenactments of this sort happened in the times of Claudius, and the biggest takeout on the subject that we can get from the sources is that the participants were condemned criminals. But yeah, it is a subject in itself. The trailer tries to be poetic and melodramatic when talking about the Colosseum, which is unintentionally funny. They literally say things that the Colosseum was the greatest temple Rome ever built because this is what they believe in. Power. Well, no, it wasn't the only thing Romans believed in, they weren't neo-Marxists. Also, you're talking about a friggin' stadium, where wrestlers/actors performed their routine, some wild animals were killed, some trained animals performed tricks, and you also had dwarfs engaged in mock battles and probably some female dancers or something, all that carnival/circus activities. But later, the Colosseum was actually consecrated as a Christian church, mostly because of this myth about the imaginary persecutions of imaginary Christians. Now, the next big thing. Obviously, the movie has to comply with the idea of diversity. They tried to do this just a little bit in the first movie, but now it's almost in your face in Gladiator II.
Too much.
But before we discuss the diversity thing, I'd like to engage in shameless self-promotion. I have released a game called Oedipus/Antigone. It is a visual novel adaptation of the Theban cycle of Sophocles, Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone. It is a visual novel. A visual novel is a genre of games when you're basically reading an illustrated story. So basically you have the English translation by Richard Jebb, you have the original text in ancient Greek for reference, and you have illustrations. All of the characters in the game are represented as marble sculptures, usually quite damaged sculptures. The choice of this particular style was absolutely conscious, and one of the main ideas was to evoke a certain feeling. This is pretty much how objects of material culture from classical antiquity came down to us. This is how we frequently perceive classical antiquity. Obviously, I'm perfectly aware of the fact that the Theban plays of Sophocles are included in the curriculum in universities and high schools. So I want to provide a healthy alternative to just reading a book or to listening to an audiobook. And for people who already read Sophocles, it might be just a reasonably unconventional way of adapting the material and an interesting excuse to reread the tragedies. The link to the Steam page is in the description. If you want to support this channel, now you know the way. Thank you. Back to diversity in Gladiator II. We have a character played by Denzel Washington, and everyone's gonna tell you that, he's such a great actor, and a character like this is more or less plausible from a historical perspective. He kind of is, if you're just watching the trailer. But if you proceed to Wikipedia or IMDb to read the credits, it all falls apart. It is a horrible and politically driven casting decision, really. So Denzel Washington is portraying Macrinus. It is this short-lived emperor who succeeded Caracalla, unless the screenwriters just borrowed the name and gave it to a completely different character. But I assume that it is based on real-life Macrinus. And therefore the depiction of Macrinus is wrong, just like the depiction of Caracalla and Geta. And yes, the movie is set in the year when both Caracalla and Geta succeeded their father Septimius Severus. Since modern Hollywood is obsessed with the color of the skin and your ethnic background, here's the ethnic background of these emperors. Septimius Severus was a Carthaginian, essentially a Phoenician mixed with some indigenous North Africans. These tribes who are considered distant ancestors of the people currently known as Berbers. His wife, Julia Domna, was from Syria, a member of the aristocratic house which had their own pocket theocracy in the region. Caracalla and Geta were largely of the Phoenician stock, and if you want to depict them more or less accurately, you probably should hire Arabs. Instead, they are doing, you can see what they are doing. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that since the Severan dynasty was mostly a train wreck of epic proportions, the filmmakers decided to whitewash them a little bit. Otherwise people might think that you depict Arabs in the negative light. Or they will think that, hold on a second, the dynasty that led the empire into the chaos of the 3rd century was essentially a foreign dynasty that introduced quite a lot of North Africans to the upper echelons of Roman society. So maybe that's the reason for the collapse of classical Rome. And you're not allowed to ask these questions and elaborate on the subject. Apparently, the screenwriters also decided to merge Caracalla and Elagabalus. That's the only explanation I have for this hilarious makeup. And don't get me started on Elagabalus. Now, as I've said, there was quite a lot of nepotism going on at the court of the Severans. And that explains how people like Macrinus appeared in Rome, because Macrinus, depicted by Denzel Washington, was from North Africa. And the sources say that he was a Moor, which in this case implies North African ancestry, or Numidian ancestry, if you will. The first Gladiator actually had a Numidian character as well. The problem here is that the screenwriters thought that Numidians were some sub-Saharan black people. Well, in fact, once again, they were North Africans. So if you want to depict Macrinus more or less accurately, you probably need some actor with sizable Berber ancestry. You can find them in Algeria, Tunisia, or Libya. But they decided to go with the African American and introduce hip-hop to the soundtrack. And during the course of a trailer, Macrinus even mentions that he used to be a slave, or to be more precise, I was owned, now I will control an empire. So now we're supposed to watch how this character, who was never related to any African Americans, rises to power from slavery, he never was a slave, obviously, to become the Emperor of Rome. It is so heavy-handed, inaccurate and inappropriate that you start wondering if the movie is produced by Disney or Netflix. Speaking of slavery, the screenwriters apparently still have this weird idea from the first Gladiator that ancient Rome was a lawless society where everyone could be enslaved, slaves had no rights, etc., etc. The main character is Lucius, son of the Emperor Lucius Verus, who was separated from his mother and somehow ended up being a slave, which is a fantastic story. almost on par with this nonsensical story of Maximus from the first movie. I have to remind you that Maximus was a general who somehow was enslaved in Spain by a band of evil slave traders, which obviously is an impossible scenario. Naturally, there's absolutely no reason to discuss the details of the real-life counterparts of Lucius and his mother. The movie characters are completely fictional. Both Lucilla and Lucius Verus the Younger were long dead by the time Caracalla and Geta became emperors. So naturally, what we're looking at is yet another story that treats ancient Rome as a fantasy setting, kinda like the Lord of the Rings. And once again, we hear this story that, the people who laid the foundations of our civilization were in fact degenerates, and that the country that, with all its imperfections, was the beacon of light in the sea of barbarism, was in fact an abomination which should have been destroyed. Well, yeah, the world of classical antiquity was destroyed, indeed. How did it work for you? All these centuries of darkness and incredible, unprecedented degradation of technology and culture. Gladiator II will be released in November and is going to be one of the most insulting comedies of the year. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give this video 5 stars, and buy some of my stuff. See you soon.